Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us for Think CX, Women Digital Leaders Tell All. My name is Maren Sakri. I'm the Director of Marketing for Evolv AI and will be your host today. As I was just sharing, I think we could have probably kicked this off about 10 minutes ago because we've already had an amazing conversation even prior to going live. So I'm eager to get the conversation started. We have a powerhouse panel of 4 women digital leaders, and I look forward to exploring brand authenticity in social movements, customer experience trends, and a topic at the forefront of every company right now, diversity and inclusion. So before I introduce our panelists, if you do have any questions, please ask in the chat area and we will try and funnel those through. We have a ton of content and questions to get through today. If we don't get to your questions, we certainly will follow up via email after the webinar. So before we jump in, let me first introduce our panel. Gayatri Buddha is Europe Head for Digital Marketing and Content Services at Cognizant. She launched IndiaMonster.com and helped Make My Trip expand globally. She currently defines digital transformation and customer experiences for European businesses at Cognizant, even though that's not what she had in mind when she started her career as a journalist. She is also a plant enthusiast, if you can't tell. So thank you for participating, Gayatri, and please look in your inbox soon. I sent pics of my sad little fiddle leaf fig.
I will do that. Thank you so much, Mary.
Ekta Chopra brings over 20 years of technology experience from private equity and retail companies. She is currently the Chief Digital Officer for e.l.f. Beauty and is responsible for digital transformation and leading the efforts to grow their digital footprint. She got into tech because she loves breaking and fixing things. In college, she was the only woman in her networking and visual basics class, which I think is really cool. Thank you for joining us and welcome, Ekta.
Thank you, Maren.
Lauren Goldstein has over 25 years of experience driving growth and delivering customer success to some of the world's most respected and innovative companies. And I'm going to get ready for this laundry list here of brands: Adobe, Airbnb, Alteryx, American Express, GE, Google, IBM, JP Morgan Chase, LinkedIn, Salesforce, and Tableau. What an awesome career you have, Lauren. She is also a co-founder of Women in Revenue, which you will learn a little bit more about today. She's a frequent speaker at digital and growth marketing industry events. Lauren is a mom of 2 boys and happiest on the slopes, which I can certainly relate to. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Maren.
Kathy Halligan is an independent board director, helping board members and business executives understand and apply consumer-facing technology to win in the marketplace. She is on the board of public companies Ulta and Driven Brands, listed in the US, and Ferguson PLC, listed on the FTSE in London. Prior to board roles, she was the CMO for Walmart.com and VP GM Internet for Williams-Sonoma, with brands that included Pottery Barn, definitely one of my favorites. Prior, she was VP Direct Marketing for Gymboree and Blue Nile. Kathy is a speaker at Shop Talk and Lesbians Who Tech Summits, along with contributing to various publications. She is a Chicagoan living in San Francisco. She and her wife of 25 years have 2 daughters. Thanks for joining us, and it's been a pleasure to get to know you throughout this process.
I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you, Maren.
All right, so let's dig in. I want to first start talking about brands and social movements. So brands today are under a tremendous pressure to align with social movements and causes that their customers believe in and advocate for. For many brands, this is more than a PR stunt, as their own leadership wants to use their positions to take a stand in better society. I'm going to first kick this question off to Ekta. e.l.f. is in the business of beauty. Your products reflect diversity in its purest form. What is most important for brands to keep in mind when using their customer experience to connect meaningfully with their customer base on social issues?
Yeah. So first of all, thank you. This is such an amazing topic to be part of, and especially with such esteemed women. So thank you so much. I would say that when I think of diversity and inclusion, e.l.f. really embodies every aspect of that. If I think about our mission statement, which truly is e.l.f. is for every I, lip, face, and our furry friends, their paws. And inherently, that statement, we couldn't live it more. If I think about externally as well as internally, for us, it's really important to be authentic. And I think what else is important is, when you have an amazing leadership that truly believes that, if I think about our CEO to our CMO to our CFO, diversity is, you will find diversity at e.l.f. and every aspect, whether it be leadership, our board members, or our employee base as well. So how do we live it with our consumers is it starts with being connected with your community, listening to them, what matters to them. And when you do take a stand, take a stand. Don't pull back, because there are some members who are not going to like what you say. There are some members who are going to be thrilled with what you did. And I think you have to live your purpose and you have to be authentic to it. And that's what e.l.f. does really, really well, is that we are very authentic with our community. We listen to them and we stand by causes that are important to our community and just the greater good. So.
Thank you. Yes, I agree. Consistency is key. And just in looking through the e.l.f. digital experience, you have aligned yourself really authentically to key social movements, and you can tell that your company cares about it and your customers. It's really beautifully done. So thank you.
Thank you.
Gayatri, what's your perspective here?
I think, just to build on what Ekta said, right? I think the two things definitely stand out as authenticity and consistency. Without these two, your communication will not land, right? That's absolutely important. And building on another note that Ekta mentioned about, your community. Your community also includes your employees. And, and in e.l.f., if you see, for example, when the leadership lives that commitment and employees are also committed to that, that's when the brand truly stands for those causes. The only caveat, I think, or the challenge, not caveat, the challenge to brand when they start embracing social causes is that there are certain nuances to it as you move into different cultures, geographies. And I think as you keep that core, how do you ensure that, as it kind of crosses borders, how do you ensure that that is still authentic and consistent? I think that's something that the brands have to watch out for.
That's a really good point. I didn't think about that, but for brands that really do have that global footprint, that is a challenge, because so much happened here in the United States this past year that you all saw on the news, but we didn't experience in the same way we did.
That's true.
Kathy, I'd like to hear.
So many great things have already been said. What I would add is taking it from that authenticity and tone at the top into your operations. So executing at the operational level can either support or blow up your commitment to DEI. And one example that might be illustrative to prove the point is in beauty, for example. As Ekta knows, foundation shades. Many brands have 30 to 60, sometimes more foundation shades, right? Which is completely needed. If you're not in stock in some shades, if you only carry the light shades, or in store or online, that really goes against your commitment to DEI, right? So making sure your operational protocols and policies look at replenishment. There's alerts if the replenishment falls below certain safety stock levels in certain products and services that you view are inclusive, and making sure you have the management activity to get back in stock or address some of those operational pain points that could harvest your authenticity and commitment to DEI.
Kathy, thank you for bringing that point up, because that is such a true point. And I also think it's like the broader issue of ethics and AI, which is a big deal. And with all the personalization, I couldn't agree more that that's a great example.
Yes, when you think of alignment, I think that's such a good example because the experience from digital to purchase needs to be completely seamless. So internally, if your teams aren't aligned to figure those things out, the brand can fail, and you can lose multiple customers through that process. So thank you, great examples. Let's move on to the second question. What have you observed over the past year with regards to emphasis placed on diversity of roles in the technology sector and leadership? Kathy, would love to get your perspective here.
Sure, this is a phenomenal question. And, I've been really inspired and moved by the authentic and scaled response to George Floyd's murder and to some of the injustices that happened previously. I have seen differences, at least in the corporate boardroom and in consulting with other companies, in people's awareness of the issues after the tragic events of George Floyd's murder. What I haven't seen is emphasis, right? So attention and awareness is different from emphasis. Emphasis moves to action. So two considerations maybe. There's structural issues to be attended to, and then there's operational issues to be attended to. From a structural standpoint, that includes comp structures, benefits, policies, processes, and some have done a really good job with this. So Mark Benioff, for example, in 2018 adjusted compensation structures when the inequities around female to male in the exact same position existed. He addressed those right away. And I have to give a shout out to Susan Fowler, who in 2017 wrote the Medium post that many of you might have read on her experience at Uber. And what she went on to do in a very authentic and earnest way was address a structural issue around mandatory, or some would call it forced arbitration, and the gag rule if there's a sexual harassment situation. So there was a law that was passed, AB 3080, a couple of years after her Medium post, and that addresses a structural issue that's dear to populations who don't want forced arbitration and the gag rule around sexual harassment issues. So those are structural. A lot of the structural issues are being addressed from outside organizations, in my view. As it relates to operational issues, these are things that are in everybody's power to address in the near term. And some are moving that way, although the numbers haven't changed. So that calls to question, how much have they really changed? I'll give one example that I think is an easy one to implement. And Mark Benioff introduced this in 2018. He said, no meeting can take place at salesforce.com unless 30% of the participants in the room are women. Full stop. So if there's a meeting in which the decision makers are all men, they must invite women to the meeting, even if they're not decision makers. And that ensures, from an operational standpoint, that there's access to information and knowledge, which is really key in building out diverse organizations. I haven't checked back in, but I'm wondering if he also has implemented a similar practice as it relates to people of color, which would be phenomenal. But long-winded answer to your question, but those are my thoughts.
Thank you. Yes, I think that last point you said, access to the knowledge base, is key, and having a seat at the table is so important. And I've experienced that really early on in my career as well, and trying to gain that seat and gain that access, not so I can be part of the answer, but just so I can hear the conversations going on. So I think those are great examples. Thank you. Ekta, what have you seen?
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more with Kathy. I think there's the structural component and the operational component. I can just speak for our brand personally. One of the things that I love about working for e.l.f. is that we have these town halls that are not really our CEO town halls. They are hosted by the CEO, but they are very authentic, transparent town halls. And we actually call external speakers to come in and talk about certain issues and certain, what other companies are doing. So we've had attendees from Uber, Peloton, Salesforce. We had the head of DEI from Salesforce come in and talk about diversity and inclusion as well. And I think part of that is that we don't know everything, and we want to try to do the best that we can. And that can only come from learning and knowledge and adopting what other people are doing, because this is a very complex topic as well. And in order to like really execute a strategy against it and make sure you are living it throughout the organization, you have to learn from others who are doing it right. And I think that's one of the things that we do embody. And I think that's helping, you know, a lot in our organization, and our teams can speak to that. But I think externally, what I'm also seeing is that, you know, as a women in tech in Silicon Valley, I personally have seen things get better. Like they can be improved. They certainly can be, but I think they're getting better. And I think that's because everybody's becoming more and more conscious. And they are sort of, there's certainly movement, you know, against sort of making this better. So.
Thanks, Ekta. Yes, I've experienced and observed a lot of this, especially with recent grads that are coming into their careers. You know, growing up, there was always a line to me of here's your career and here's your personal life. And new grads, they don't accept that. There's a complete blurred line between those two things, and they expect that transparency at work. So I think it's a really welcome change. And the first step is acknowledging that, look, we need to do better as a company.
Yeah.
Thank you. So this next question is a little controversial, but I want to get your thoughts on how a company ensures that they are finding the best possible talent and not simply just checking a box. Lauren, would love to get your perspective on this.
Well, I mean, first and foremost, I think one of the changes that we've all seen in the last 18 months is that we are not limited to the talent in our backyard, right? I think that as companies move into a remote and hybrid workforce, we can really go out and seek the best talent ever. One of the stats that I, have wanted to quote along the way is a stat from McKinsey that says companies with female executives are 25% more likely to have better than average profitability. So we have some really quantifiable data points that say having diverse perspectives in the room, in the discussions. I love your point from Salesforce, Kathy, but that really pays off. And whether it's having diversity around the table in terms of gender or diversity in terms of background or race, I think those are all so important. But I think the other important point I want to hit on in terms of ensuring that we find the best possible talent is really understanding what will have the greatest mode for success as women join the organization. And so one piece I do want to share a little bit about is a survey that the Women in Revenue conducted. It's our 2021 survey. And when they questioned top challenges that women were facing in their environments, it was things that we would expect: work-life balance, understanding compensation, so having transparency of compensation, having access to mentors. Those are the top challenges that women face. So I think it's not just about companies ensuring that they are finding the best possible talent, but on the other side of it, making sure that those organizations really understand what it's going to take to attract and retain and ensure that the women in the organization are thriving.
Thanks, Lauren. Yes, I think we're all figuring out how to ensure that we're doing what we say we're going to do, and then ensuring that we're maintaining that talent as well. Kathy, what's your opinion on this?
Yeah, no, I agree, Lauren. You made two exceptional points, and I'll be the skeptic in the room, but we haven't seen the numbers change in the Valley in a very long time, right? So Lauren, the point you made that now we're not limited to talent in our backyard, if the numbers don't change now, I'll be really bummed because access to talent has the biggest constraint removed. So if I add to what Lauren and Marin said, I think there's two other things to consider. One is to look at talent completely. As someone who was pressured to fill open recs or find talent when I was in operating roles, sometimes one gets into really looking narrowly as like, where do they work last? What are their skills today? You know, how can I get, you know, arms and legs that could do the job in the door? I encourage everyone to look a little bit more broadly at the whole picture, and not to say that everybody looks narrowly, but look at the whole picture, especially in senior roles, because it is an executive, and there's a lot of folks on here who are executives. You need to ensure the health of the enterprise for more than this role, right? So it's over the next several years. So looking completely. So I'll give you one example. There are many in the Valley who will not hire tech talent unless they have a CS degree, a computer science degree, and will not accept code camp graduates as qualified talent, which is really unfortunate. Code camp graduates are qualified tech talent, and there's a disproportionately high share of people of color and women who graduate from code camps. So looking at, you know, kind of holistically skills and development, accessing diverse talent for now and next, and looking beyond maybe the traditional sources of talent. And look to code camps is just one example.
In fact, Kathy, to your point on talent, right? And we are living this today because, you know, the whole, right now, as we speak, the world is going through a lot of attrition that is driven by, you know, the change in the industry. One of the things that we've noticed is that as people switch jobs, right? It is not possible for us to get trained people because, you know, this technology did not exist, right? So this point that what you made a very valid point about the fact that you need people with experience. You can't have experience because there was no digital, you know, 20 years back. There was no, you know, Salesforce 15 years back. So I think we, as employers, I think we probably have to look for talent, which is based on skill, attitude, aptitude, and things like that. And they are not always directly correlated to a, you know, computer science degree, for example.
That is such a great point. Excellent point.
You know, I think just as you both were chatting, I was thinking about the education needed with hiring and recruiting as well, because, you know, Kathy, to your point with the code camp, if you were a recruiter and didn't have a skill set in those functional areas, you wouldn't necessarily even know that. So making sure that you have a tight-knit relationship with your recruiting team is so important, I think, just to make sure you are hiring to that diversity that you just mentioned. All right.
And I was pleasantly surprised yesterday when we were having an internal review, and this was about actually the topic of D&I and how do we ensure through the recruitment process actually we're addressing it first. So the intake, and then of course, you know, a growth of that team within the organization. One of the first agenda points that my colleague from HR shared was that training HR and recruitment team was actually the first point. And that is absolutely I think in line with what you're talking about.
That's good to hear. This kind of dives into that question a little bit further. So as a leader, what are you doing in your company and across your teams to drive diversity and foster inclusion? Ekta, what are you doing at e.l.f?
Yeah. So I think for me, it's really important that, you know, I give back in my own way. And that's important to me. So I would say in my own team, there's a lot of women in tech. And I am so proud of that. That's number one. I also think for me, it's also important that if I see people who are maybe not in the director role yet, or they just came out of college and they're trying to get an experience or anything, how do I make sure that I know who those you know, young talent is out there, so I can help them maybe connect with a mentor, maybe connect with certain groups that's going to help them, or whatever that might be. So I think for me, I look at diversity in a holistic way. It's not just about women. It's not just about a certain gender. It's not just about, you know, what your preference. It is holistic. I want to make sure that everyone who comes into my organization has so many tools in their toolbox to really have a successful career journey. And I think that's my way of making sure that I am taking into account diversity, inclusion, but also opportunity. Because sometimes what we don't tend to do is we see a shining star, they're doing a great job, and we keep on promoting them. But sometimes they need external resources. They need a board of director for themselves, or they need some connection that's actually going to help them grow and even build a diverse thinking for them as well, that they can bring back into the organization. So I think at every level, when I talk to my teams, I want to make sure that when they're looking for people, they have gone out and looked at a broad set of pool, not just, hey, I'm going to hire from this or I'm going to hire from that. Let me see who you have. And even I push my developers, I don't see any women in development here. What's going on? So we have very candid discussions about it. It's because, have you given this a thought? And it's important it stays at top of mind for them.
Maren, I'd love to add one thing there as well that I think we all can take on the challenge of doing, not just the women that are in this discussion, but the women that are in this webcast, whether it's today or in the future. Be a mentor. And whether you do it in a formal setting like through Women in Revenue, or you just have that mindset when you show up to work every day, one of the top challenges that we hear from women in revenue in our survey is that they are yearning for mentorship. And we have data that shows that women who work with mentors, they get promotions, they get paid more, and most importantly, they are happy at work. And I just think it's something that is often overlooked because it can be very simple and informal. But show up every day with an opportunity to help mentor, to help pair up people on your team that could learn from one another.
Thanks. Yeah. And I'd love for you to expand a little bit about women in revenue. I think it's a good time to talk about that. One of the data points you shared with me earlier is that your membership has tripled this year. So talking a little bit more about participating in a program like this, why do you think it's vital for the longevity of diversity inclusion, and why now?
I mean, I think, we've talked around a lot of these topics, but there's more transparency today than ever before. And I think that, perhaps one of the COVID silver linings is it gave us all an opportunity to stop and say, what am I doing for myself? Yes, I'm taking home a paycheck or I'm providing for my family, but what am I actually doing to make myself whole? And so, when we look at what Women in Revenue is a vessel to provide, it's things like mentorship programs. I encourage everybody to do a quick plug, womeninrevenue.org. It is a 501c3 nonprofit, but mentorship is one of our flagship solutions. And we really make it an effort, even if it's, not pairing one-on-one, if that's something that doesn't necessarily suit you. We have huddles where we get women who have a lot to offer, whether it's in terms of how to find your superpower or negotiate for your next promotion, leading discussions. So I think that, our membership has tripled this year. We have over 5,000 members. Membership is free because of underwriting from some fantastic technology companies. But I think women are really using this time to focus on how to learn and grow. I'll do one more plug that in addition to some of the mentorship programs, you can find worksheets on our website, things like how to build your personal brand, how to find your superpower, how to navigate unexpected career challenges, and how to negotiate your next promotion. Those are all things that we've heard women really wanting access to. So whether you do it one-to-one, one-to-few, or you take a worksheet and do it on your own, we really think that it's important to use this time to work on you.
Thanks for sharing that. And I wanted to throw a little curveball in here. We have a couple questions that have come in, and I think one of them ties in really well with what you were just sharing. What advice did you wish someone gave you early in your career? And what advice do you want to pass on to the next generation of women? That's a long, tough question, kind of. It's loaded. Anyone want to take a stab at answering first?
I'll just share one, and that's relationships matter. And so you have to be really good at what you do from a functional expertise is really important, but that's not where it ends. And I think, I know a lot of women who are really excellent at the skills they do, and maybe not focus as much on the relationships across the organization, in or out. So relationships matter, and spending time cultivating relationships is really important, no matter where you are in an organization, if you're just starting out or you've been at it for 20 years. So that's just one thought.
Kathy, I love that. Mine is very similar in that I think growing up in an industry with a lot of men, like being tough, was something that we were told we had to do, right? We had to show up with our game face every single day. And I think that tapping into the softer spot, especially as women, that emotive caretaking side, people need that and want that and are yearning for it. And so I would say, don't be afraid to tap into that nurturing side of yourself. And maybe I'm speaking more to the women that are joining this session, but it's okay. It's not showing weakness.
Yeah, I love both points, and I'll add one more. I think to Kathy's point of relationship, I think it's also relationships, not just internally, but externally, because networking is so underrated sometimes. And I think that's your biggest opportunity to learn, be inspired, and that really helps your thinking, and it also diversifies how you approach your career as well. So I do think that it's not just internal relationships, but it's also external relationships. On the point of what Lauren mentioned, I think for me personally, I've always maintained empathy is my superpower. And that has always been there because of my mom. And my mom, always ingrained in me that when you put yourself in other people's shoes, you really understand sort of what they're going through. And I do that in my career today as a digital leader, but I also sort of in my teams too, I think it's important to empathize with everyone, in your team members too. They've gone through a lot last year. And I think that superpower really helped me build a connection with my team in a deeper way. So, and I was always like, hey, am I being too emotional or too connective? And I was getting in my own way. So stop getting in your own way. Do what's authentic to you, because that's the most important thing.
Thanks, Ekta. And I'll add, I think it's so important to seek out leadership that that you can learn from. And sometimes early in your career, it's easy to accept some of the first opportunities that come along. But, midway through your career, you start to learn, okay, I need to learn from leaders that I aspire to be like and that I want to lead like. So I think that that's really important as well. All right, so shifting gears, let's talk about tech and digital experience. So I want to talk through a little bit about customer experience, which for companies over this past year has dramatically transformed, especially the last 16 months. Where are you seeing companies prioritize investments right now, and what trends are influencing those choices? Gayatri, I'd love to start with you.
Yeah, sure, Marie. I think, and a lot of it is personal lived experience. So I think folks will relate to it, is that a lot of the trends in the last 1 year, 1.5 years now, actually, we're forgetting, is that it's been around access to market, which means brands and businesses which were used to doing or reaching customers, whether it is a Unilever reaching out to the chefs, or whether it is, Sainsbury reaching out to its customers, right? I think all of that has changed, which means that reaching customer, whether in the past, for example, interestingly, you could not access. Unilever could not have reached out to, let us say, a single customer, but today they can. Similarly, there are new channel investments that are being made, and I think there is enough data around going around. For example, that 10 years of digital transformation has been crunched in the last 1.5 years. So access to market, going direct to consumers, and building those relationships where the customers, the brands and businesses were not owning the customer data, right? That is where a lot of the emphasis is going. The good thing is that that investment has kickstarted, and I think most probably it will continue going by the direction that we're seeing right now.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I've just been amazed at the amount of brands that have overnight, in some cases, as it appears to us, have completely switched to a D2C model. And it's happening at light speed. It's just incredible. So it says a lot for innovation and how the climate right now is driving that innovation. Ekta, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think agree to everything that Gayatri said. One of the things that I would say, what digital sort of acceleration has also done is shine the spotlight on that it's not just about the tech or the tools or the process. It's also, you need a content supply chain. And if you don't have a content supply chain, you cannot reach your different consumers at different touch points, which are very, very unique. And every consumer, every interaction is very unique. So having a solid content supply chain is an area of focus and an investment. I think the second is data. So, and I know it sounds cliched, but data is the fuel for your digital ecosystem. It's the currency that fuels it. And I think it's really important that in order for you to learn about that, unique consumer experience and serve that content at the right, to the right consumer, you need to understand your consumer. So in making sure that your data pipelines and your data ecosystem is well built is another big investment area. And of course, I think digital has also shined the light on that. It's not just here in US, but it's globally, a global expansion is a big area of, a sort of investment as well. So I think those are the trends that we continue to invest in, is data and building a content supply chain and international.
And that in some way, Marine, is also linked to the topic of talent that we had earlier, right? I mean, the huge pressure the last 1 year, 1.5 years it has put in is that all of us have learned new things, right? Businesses have obviously, completely changed the way they're operating. And the whole access to talent in the market is actually, in the brands that are winning are the ones that can attract the best talent, and the brands that are slowing down are because actually they don't have that kind of talent. So to Kathy's point, you need to look outside of the regular pool. You've got to think out of the box, really.
Thank you. Lauren, what do you have to add on this topic?
Well, it definitely resonates, this notion of content, because I think when I look at the best B2B brands, what they're doing is they're understanding what that customer journey looks like, whether it's pre-sale or whether they're a customer and it's about creating upsale and a long tail of relationships. And so the brands that are top performing in terms of delivering great customer experience and also in terms of delivering success for the business are those that are really operationalizing their go-to-market around the buyer journey. And that's about getting people, processes, content, and technology aligned in a way that's always on, so that your go-to-market, your sales and marketing efforts are really essentially supporting what the customer wants at every step of the journey. And, I look at brands. There's a company that I've worked with in my past called NWEA. They're in the e-learning technology space. And they actually just got a really nice accolade from Adobe for doing an exceptional job of that. And when you look at companies that are doing it, again, not only are they getting, better scores from their customers, but their increase of revenue is significant as a result. So it's not just good for customers, but it's good for business too.
Thank you. I think those were all really good points. So we know that delivering a customer experience that connects every time with a wide range of people is very challenging. Ekta, I'm going to start with you, as I assume this is a day in the life question for a chief digital officer. Can you talk about the impact the acceleration of digital commerce has had on the need to operate at a different scale and velocity when it comes to optimizing the customer experience?
Yeah. So I think I pride myself, once again, I love working for e.l.f. And it's because when I think of an ideal place for me personally, where I've seen a culture which is pivoting and moving as quickly as this ecosystem is changing, I think e.l.f. has been that place for me. there's speed and then there's e.l.f. speed, and we live it every single day. We see a signal, we if it's, you know, from either whether it be a new channel or whether it be what the consumer need is or what we're seeing out there, and we react to it. We don't dwell over it. There's no red tape. And I think what I would say to that is that DNA has helped us last year, and it's going to continue to help us, you know, in the future as well. The question is going to come in is how do we maintain that as part of our culture? Because the more you scale and the more you grow, it becomes harder to be nimble, and it becomes harder to sort of have this agility in your DNA. So I think that's one thing we continue to focus on, is maintaining our DNA, which is moving at the speed of how quickly this consumer, you know, landscape is changing. So for us, it comes very naturally.
Well, in cosmetics, I mean, I always am kind of baffled by the amount of innovation in just makeup, right? I see things, I'm like, why didn't I think of that? That's amazing. But I mean, on top of that, you have all of these Instagram influencers that are coming up with all different kinds of things, and understanding the data and being able to extrapolate that quickly and work at e.l.f. speed, which I think is a phenomenal company motto to follow and live by when working with e.l.f. But thank you. I think those are great examples. Gayatri, you live in the world of content. What's your POV on this?
No, I think, you know, two things, obviously, you know, I'm on the services side, unlike Ekta. So for me, and, you know, we live this every day. We keep telling our clients, and Lauren talked about it, right? Wherever there is content and data are the fuel that, you know, kind of drive all of this. 2 points to what Ekta said. One is she spoke earlier about content supply chain. The second thing she talked about is agility in the time of acceleration. If you look at all of these dimensions, the one thing that we are constantly seeing is that marketing organizations today are set up the way they were set up, 2 decades, 3 decades back, right? So they still operate in an annual marketing calendar, right? There is a big campaign, there's a tentpole event, right? Things like that. That world has changed. And so when, for example, marketing campaign decisions are taken, they're taken by a channel, or they're taken by a product, or they're taken by a market, right? The customer doesn't live like that. I'm shopping for brands that are in US. In fact, I found a brand which was in Eastern Europe. So when I'm living a journey which is cross-border, how are marketing teams coping with it when they are living in silos? So I think the marketing operating models are actually also coming in the way of that speed and agility that brands and businesses are looking for.
So I will add 1 point to Gayatri's, and that's why, once again, I feel like I'm in a unique brand. 80% of our organization reports into the CMO. And that's from the time and R&D of the product all the way through to the purchase, all the way through to the insights. And I think that is one thing that I think has helped us too, because we are aligning our organization to the consumer journey for every single, sort of aspect of building that product to selling that product. And I think that has been sort of a great organizational structure that has built this agility throughout with customer centricity.
I love that.
That is powerful.
It is.
So I'm going to shift a little bit into some techie talk. Are you seeing the use of artificial intelligence and machine learning helping to level the playing field when it comes to optimizing the customer experience? Lauren, would love to kick this off with you.
I mean, yes, I think that, Ekta said it best, that when you align your organization, and I think it's incredible that 80% of your business, is really aligned to customer journey, we do see, 4 to 10x results. So, if you think about things in a really mechanical way, like a funnel, like a sales funnel, and more so in B2B where it's a longer sales cycle, those companies that are using AI and are using data to understand what next best piece of content or what next best experience, whether it's online or whether it's getting them in touch with a human. The companies that are doing it best are turning their funnels from looking like a martini glass into a pint glass. And I can tell you that any sales and marketing leader, or really anybody in an organization, wants their funnel to be pint glass shaped. So, you know, I think it's fantastic when everyone is following that same drumbeat of being customer focused, and using data like AI insights to understand what next best action to move somebody to.
Absolutely. I love that analogy, martini glass versus pint glass. That's terrific. Kathy, would love your response here.
Yeah, no, very, really salient points Lauren makes. I'd say, you know, unlike all the other women on this call, I'm not in an operating role, so I don't have specific hands-on examples, but what I see is really interesting. So as a recovering database marketer, you know, from Land's End up to Williams-Sonoma with huge data sets, you know, the old is new again. You know, AI, more data, a lot more data, much more sophisticated and complex algorithms, much more speed, but there's still underlying data. And we all know, we know it's a truth that there is bias in data. We know it. So the only observation I could make is in the use of AI and machine learnings and other tools, they have to be human engaged. You have to look at the data. It's not a hands-off process. It's not a black process. It's not magic. There has to be human engagement. There has to be human involvement. You have to look for the bias. It's not a set and forget it. And there's a lot written about this, and there's a lot of techniques you can use. So I just encourage anyone who's working on AI, who's working on the algorithms, who's working on the data prep, who's working on the programs that use it, to be very skeptical that the AI doesn't have bias and look for it, and, you know, set up protocols to evaluate it and work towards eliminating it. But it's early days, and there's a lot to be done.
Yeah, I mean, I'll add one point. Ethics in AI is a big, big topic. And you cannot undermine sort of the issues and the challenges it's going to create in the journey ahead. So having a structural sort of a way to, yes, you know, you want to do things in scale, and AI helps you do that and all this good stuff. But I think it's also important that you're ready to sort of face some of those challenges as well. And a human sort of interaction is going to be sort of the key there, because even the people building the AI, there's, you know, who's building it, their own biases. As human beings, we're biased, you know, so they're coming into that. So couldn't agree more. And I think one of the things that I've personally done is, you know, I meet with a professor at Berkeley, Drew, who does this amazing lecture on ethics and AI. And I think everyone should figure out how to educate themselves on this if you are a digital or a data leader, because it's going to continue to become one of our biggest challenges moving forward.
All right, so 2 questions left. Name one woman digital leader or marketer that you follow closely, either on Instagram or elsewhere, and why. I'll lead with Bozoma St. John, otherwise known as the Badass Boss. And I like her because she is completely unapologetic and authentic in her own right. She's completely challenged the status quo as a Black female leader. So please follow her, check her out. She's got a ton of great content. Who else has someone they'd like to throw out there?
For me, it's Suja Chandrasekhan, and she is on the board of American Eagle Outfitters, but she's been a board member throughout many, many great brands. She's now a senior executive vice president and chief digital officer at a Common Spirit Health. And what I really admire about her career journey is a female in tech. I love her just thinking. She pushes to people to a new thinking. And I've seen that in the transformation that American Eagle has even gone through. She's completely transformed that brand from a board perspective. And I just really admire her.
You know, I can add 2. I can't limit it to one. I could share quite a few, but I'll pick 2. One is Megan Smith. She was Barack Obama's chief technology officer and on the board of MIT. She was an executive at Google in some of the new ventures. And she was the CEO of Planet Out, for those of you who remember back in the day before the internet fully developed. She was the first queer company to get tier 1 VC backing. She's amazing. Her current company is Shift 7, and it's about harnessing the power of inclusion to solve big problems. So I encourage you to go to shift7.com and look at that. The other is Leanne Pittsford, who founded Lesbians Who Tech. And Lesbians Who Tech has 41,000 members in 100 countries. And it was founded in 2012. So it's been around for a while. And from the get-go, this is the power of purpose and vision. From the start, she committed to 50% women of color on the stage at her summits, and her summits are huge. Her Lesbians Who Tech summits are huge and have had everyone from Hillary Clinton to Mark Benioff to Kara Swisher to everybody on stage, Megan Smith included. And she's done it from the get-go. And Marin, your special shout out was an early guest when she was the CMO at Uber and took on a lot of very challenging questions about the Uber environment. So Leanne and Megan are my two.
Great. Well, we are getting close to time, and we have one more question that I want to make sure we get in that came in from the attendees. So I'll ask this one last question. As a mother of 3 myself and focused on my career as well, prioritizing myself is probably the toughest challenge I have. So what advice do you have for women that are balancing their work and personal lives? Ekta, I'll start with you.
Yeah, so I have a 6-year-old daughter. She is my strength. And I think what COVID gave me last year was a lot of time with her. And and I loved it. Like, I was so jealous because my husband was always like her closest. And what I learned from that experience is I am going to do everything to ensure that in my crazy life where I love my job, I'm passionate about it, and I have no boundary when it comes to work, I'm going to make sure that I spend time with my daughter. And I think that's like one thing is, if you want to take care of if you don't take care of yourself, you can't take care of others. And having, what gives you joy, what gives you happiness, I think it's really important to maintain that. This world is a crazy place. So if you found something last year that changed your thinking, your life, maintain that going forward. And for me, it's spending time with my daughter and making sure I do that.
I think that's terrific. And it was a challenging year. We had our kids everywhere all the time. Lauren.
Yeah, I love that. I think my one piece of advice is to not be afraid to ask for help. We're all human. And I too had kids, working and schooling from all parts of the house. But, whether asking for help is, tapping into your personal community saying like, hey, I need someone to get rid of my kids for the afternoon, please help me. Or whether that's in a professional setting, asking for guidance on a challenge you're not able to overcome. I think that we are so ingrained as strong female leaders to just figure it out. And whether that's at home or whether that's in the professional environment. And I'd say don't be afraid to ask for help.
I want to get in this last question because I think it ties on a lot of what we just discussed. So this came in from Carmen Lake. Do you believe that the women who have decided to go back to school for the betterment of their careers will be better off as entrepreneurs or working for an organization, or do both?
I can take that question, considering that I did take a break, and then I went back to college, and then I came back to work. I think the short answer would be much of it would be your personal choice on who you are. Do remember that entrepreneurship is glamorous from outside, but it is it is hard work. So if you're willing to commit to that and you're willing to sign up for it, I think definitely you should do that. However, if you would like to transition into entrepreneurship after you get into a job, that is also an option. That's also an option for you to consider. And the reason why I say that is because we live in a different world today. if you want to be an entrepreneur at 60, it's absolutely possible to be. So don't imagine that, everybody's got to be 30-year-old or 20-year-old and living in a garage to be an entrepreneur. So I think take your chances with what you like.
Excellent answer.
All right, so we are at almost top of the hour here. I'm going to go ahead and close this out today. I just want to thank Gayatri, Kathy, Ekta, Lauren. This has been such a fun panel. Thank you for your time and insights. Check out ThinkCX episodes 1 through 16 at evolv.ai, and this playback will be available sent through email shortly. If you have any recommended topics on future ThinkCX series, please do reach out at hello@evolv.ai. Thank you all so much for your time and have a great week.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.